Sekiro: Shadows Die Twice follows a long legacy of Fromsoftware games, and part of that legacy has been multiplayer. In Dark Souls and Bloodborne, players could challenge each other or help each other. In Sekiro, there will be no multiplayer elements to speak of. You are truly a lone shinobi, wandering a land filled only with enemies. Today, we're going to be taking a look at why that might be a good news, and how it's going to change the landscape of Sekiro's boss battles and further beyond. The Soulsborne games were rightfully loved and hated in their own ways, and part of that relationship was with multiplayer. The regular players found the game hard enough without being invaded by enemy players, and the hardcore players wanted to hunt those players down without fear of anyone coming to their aid. In boss fights, inviting a friendly player to help you take down a giant thrashing horse or a pair of demons was always a great crutch for frustrated players, but most tried to defeat those bosses alone. Nonetheless, bosses had to be designed for multiplayer fights, increasingly so as the series continued. In Sekiro, we're going to be going toe-to-toe with our opponents without any of those fears. The only thing we'll have to fear is whether our blade is fast enough to stop our foes. Miyazaki has noted himself that Sekiro will take an entirely different approach to how your character is built and developed, and that will result in a more independent, player-driven power scale. He told Game Informer that this way of building the game, it gives us greater freedom, and it gives the player greater freedom to decide how they want to tackle this, or to encourage them to try and find something else, and to keep adding to their arsenal and to use every little bit of it to defeat these challenges. Now, it's worth noting here that all of the quotes in this article are from Game Informer and their interviews, as they're the only source with official access to Sekiro news. It's unlikely that many more secrets will be revealed about Sekiro, and so most content creators are working with similar information. And this means we're going to have to make our own minds up about the little evidence we have, and I can't encourage you enough to discuss in the comment section about what you all think. Miyazaki adds more details later, noting that in Sekiro our access to traversal tools like the grappling hook and new mechanics will allow for more dynamic interactions in boss fights. He said, the traversal options allow much more dynamic movement within the boss arena, both for yourself and the boss character themselves. It really increases the dynamism in how the player and the boss player play off against each other. Previously, you would just have had to run around a huge boss's feet and hack away at his ankles, but now you have all these movement options you can both use, fully use, to the extent of that arena. Stealth in mid-boss fights, it does depend on the situation, but again, it's meant as another added level of spice. It's not going to be present in all boss fights, but here and there it might add to the experience in some clever or subtle way. Now, firstly, Miyazaki does say boss player here, which could be a quirk of translation, or it could be hinting at other players being able to take control of bosses in the game, and that would be pretty awesome, and a really cool way to integrate a multiplayer aspect without changing the single player dynamic. It's not confirmed at all, and it's just a small thing, but it's definitely something to keep in mind nonetheless. Now, boss-wise, I'm immediately reminded of the giant snake that we see teased at the end of the trailer earlier this year. It's almost certainly going to be a boss-scale enemy, and one that, especially given how flimsy that wooden bridge looks, is absolutely going to require us to use all the movement tools in our arsenal to survive. And these kind of fights would be next to impossible while considering multiplayer. Instead, the developers can focus on the core experience of a single player and build upon the narrative theme of the lone wolf. And this design philosophy seems to be extending further beyond than just boss fights. Each level can now be built with the same singular mindset. The wolf, our main character, might be fixed, but that allows a whole world to be built around him. Yasuo Kitao of Fromsoft has said that we love to create our own characters just as much as everyone else. We hope players are looking forward to something in the future where we might be able to go back to that, but for now, Sekiro is very much its own thing. And this comes alongside a few genuine benefits for a player looking to immerse themselves in Sekiro's world. Firstly, a real pause button. That's right, Soulsborne fans will finally be able to answer the phone or receive their Amazon parcels without fear of losing all their hard-earned rewards. There's no fear of invasion for players wanting to get stuck in, too, and while that might be seen as a negative for players that enjoyed the PvP elements in previous games, it's clear that Sekiro has a different direction and focus than previous Soulsborne titles. And this newfound focus on single player means that more attention can be paid to getting the important moments right. Inside and outside of boss battles, the Sekiro team is free to be much more creative when developing the play space. Kitao has said, when creating these play spaces, we don't have to take into consideration how players will operate with one another in these maps, or how they may exploit the play space by cooperating or something like that. So it allows us again to hone in on the player experience and really capitalise on that lack of restriction that comes with creating a multiplayer based game, and let our imagination run wild in these places. And this imagination running wild is an enormous benefit for players who are going to see massively expansive play spaces as a result. And Miyazaki has said even more about that, as he's noted that we feel like Sekiro is probably on the higher end of the spectrum in terms of the freedom the player has to explore the world, if we're to compare it to our previous games. Particularly from the mid-game onward, the world really opens up, and you have a great deal of choice and freedom about which order and way you choose to explore. And then further to that, when he was asked about Blighttown and an equivalent, he noted that there is a similar area, but that one of the core concepts of Sekiro was to create this greater freedom of movement and freedom of traversal. And so we don't want to squash that by creating these really restricted game spaces. So yeah, you will find somewhere similar to that, and that is a pinpoint location in the game, but they don't want to try and restrict the user in ways previous ones do. So it's clear to me that there is a whole new mentality to game space here. Miyazaki has been very clear that Sekiro is its own world, and that they're going to be avoiding even small nods and references to their previous titles, in an effort to avoid dramas like the one over Bloodborne findings in Durasane, for example. And this new direction in gameplay is going to provide a completely different focus for players, one that departs from multiplayer and focuses exclusively on the single player freedom. By eliminating considerations for other aiding players and creating a newly free space that the single player can explore, Sekiro is also going to allow for much more creativity in boss design. We've already seen the monk boss where the fight takes place in a small enclosed courtyard, and we think we're going to be fighting that snake later on. We've also seen an older lady who's the butterfly who dances on these razor thin wires, and all these different elements are going to add a dynamism to fights unlike anything we've seen with Soulsborne in the past. And I think that's actually largely thanks to the lack of multiplayer. Miyazaki has said that there may be boss fights where you're up against a huge creature and you need to use the full arena to get around very quickly, but there may also be fights where you just need to go toe to toe and use every piece of kit in your arsenal, the prosthetic tool, the katana, and really go head to head on these one-on-one duels. So there's something we'll cater to on each occasion and to each boss's unique idiosyncrasies. So Sekiro is going to be an all-new adventure for everyone, and I think that's actually really good that Fromsoftware is departing from a lot of the features we'd begun to take for granted in their previous titles, as it's really going to shake up how we expect Sekiro to play. By subverting and changing expectations, Miyazaki and his team are really creating something new. Multiplayer simply doesn't have a place here, and while I'm certain we're going to see it again in their future games, I don't think we're going to miss it in Sekiro. Alright, well that's it for today's Sekiro article everyone. I hope you enjoyed that look into what we're going to be experiencing in the future, and unfortunately there still isn't much new information floating around. As I've said, Game Informer has exclusive coverage of Sekiro. We're probably going to have to wait until the game fully launches on March the 22nd to start to really unravel all of its secrets. Now, thank you for watching, don't forget to like the video if you enjoyed it, and let's really get a discussion going on in the comment section about what we think about the lack of multiplayer and the new direction for bosses and the world space. As always, there's a link to a written version of this article in the video description below if you'd like to read it, and you'll also find a link there to our growing Discord community where you can meet the creators and our lovely group. Thanks for stopping by everyone, I've been Faulty Optics, and I'll see you all again for more gaming guides and news.